Hello, it's Ms. Kellett, and I'm going to walk you through our notes on rhetorical analysis and rhetorical situation. So our goal today is to be able to explain how writers' choices reflect the components of the rhetorical situation. So what is the rhetorical situation, and then how does the writer write their text in a way that reflects that situation? Identify and describe the components of the rhetorical situation: the exigence, audience, purpose, context, and message. So we will talk about each of those things. But first, I want to do a quick review on what rhetorical analysis is. In 9th and 10th grade, you focused a lot on literary analysis, which is fiction texts and looking at maybe the theme or greater meaning, character, that sort of thing. And then at the end of 10th grade, you started looking at rhetorical analysis, which has more to do with nonfiction, like speeches, and essays, and sometimes advertisements. So what you're going to do is you're going to watch this video that's linked here about rhetorical analysis versus literary analysis. This is a video that I showed to 10th graders last year, but it's an appropriate review for you to look at. And there's also a Venn diagram if you'd like to see more of like a bigger visual. Then you are going to write 3 to 4 sentences highlighting the differences and similarities between rhetorical and literary analysis. You can use these language patterns here to do that in your notes, or you don't have to. Baseline rhetorical analysis is more looking at nonfiction texts and how the author achieves their purpose, whereas literary analysis is more looking at fictional texts and looking at how the greater meaning is revealed throughout the text. Okay, that's part 1. Part 2, we're going to look at some key terms in rhetorical analysis. Rhetorical analysis in AP English language is one of the essays, the free response questions, and then it's also a big chunk of the multiple choice part of the test. So we're going to be doing a lot of it. It's also really good to know when you're listening to a speech or when you're watching an advertisement, what moves or choices is the writer making in order to achieve their purpose. And sometimes it sounds negative when you're thinking about ads or political speeches, but it can also be a craft, right? Like, how does the speaker or writer craft their text in order to achieve their purpose? And how does like the historical context, the cultural context, all the stuff that's happening around the writer at the time help to form that text that the writer's writing? Okay, so you're going to follow the same directions we've done in the past with notes. In the box, there's some important information about rhetorical analysis. Highlight what's new in green and highlight parts you're already familiar with in yellow. If you're taking notes by hand, you could make 2 different columns: new stuff in green, old stuff shortened in, not in green, but like new stuff in one column, and then old stuff maybe shortened, but in another column. Okay, so rhetoric is the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing, especially the use of claims, evidence, reasoning, and rhetorical choices. So we'll talk more about these later, but an author chooses to use certain appeals to the audience and certain devices in a way that helps to drive at their main message or their purpose. Rhetorical analysis. Analysis is breaking down a text and explaining the parts. And then rhetorical analysis is specifically looking at the rhetoric. So how was the speaker using effective or persuasive speaking or writing in something that's nonfiction, like a speech, essay, or article, paying specific attention to how the writer uses and organizes their claims, evidence, and reasoning in order to create an effective argument. Okay, and then we've got these rhetorical situation words: exigence, purpose, audience, and context. So exigence is the part of the rhetorical situation that inspires, stimulates, provokes, or prompts writers to create a text. So, for example, in The Office, Toby, who Michael hates, is getting ready to leave, and that prompts or provokes Michael to sing a song as like a goodbye to Toby. Okay. So it's a specific event or moment that causes the writer or the speaker to write. Purpose: what the writer hopes to accomplish with the text, and writers may have more than one purpose in a text. So what does the writer want the outcome to be after people hear their speech? Audience: the readers or listeners of the text. And it's important to note that an audience of a text has shared as well as individual beliefs, values, needs, and backgrounds. And sometimes you'll see a speaker who is very aware of their audience and what they believe. A good example might be like, maybe a speaker in early American history knows that they're speaking to an audience that's mostly Christian, And so they use a lot of like biblical references, or they use a lot of like words or tone that would be persuasive to an audience that's religious. And then finally, context. Writers create text within a particular context that includes time, place, and occasion. So what larger historical, cultural, and political issues are present? For example, if you listened to a political speech today, it might be important to note that we're in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. And so a lot of what's going on in politics is going to revolve around that crisis. That is an example of like a historical issue that's currently arising. Okay. And a lot of the times when you're writing about these things and you're given like a text to look at, the little blurb at the beginning of the text, like even before the text starts, it's going to give you some of that information. And you're also going to be able to like guess at what the context is based on what the text says. Okay, once you've highlighted, you are going to complete an activity. You're going to choose one of these speeches from down here, and you should watch at least 3 to 4 minutes of the speech. Some of them are a little long, so you don't have to watch the whole thing. You can. And then you may need to do 5 to 10 minutes of Googling to research the rhetorical situation. So the rhetorical situation is going to include exigence, purpose, audience, and context. Contact me if you need some hints, because these are like political, well, 3 out of the 4 are like very political. So you might need a couple hints from me, and that's fine. But I've also linked some research here for each one, here, here, and here. And spoiler alert, they're just Wikipedia articles, but they'll help you. And then you are going to fill out the table on the second page in yellow below, explaining the rhetorical situation for your chosen speech. So you can click here to view the speeches, and then here for the research info. This one, I think you will get the context and exigence during his interview. And then just a warning, John Lewis's final essay is really powerful, but there are some disturbing images in this video clip that I just want you to be aware of. You're welcome to just listen to it. You don't really need to watch it, but you are welcome to watch it if you are ready for that. So I want to give you an example of My First Lifeline by Maya Angelou. So her exigence is like the thing that happens that causes her to write it. So the thing that happened was that she was told by her publisher that she couldn't make nonfiction sound beautiful and like poetic. And so she took it as a challenge and decided to prove him wrong. And that's how she wrote her book. Purpose. She wanted to demonstrate how a connection with a stranger can make a positive impact on someone, and prove to the audience that wisdom and knowledge do not just come from a formal education, but from life and generations of experience. So the purpose and the message are very closely related, right? So this is kind of like her message, but her purpose is that she hopes the audience walks away with that understanding, maybe does something about it in their personal lives. Audience, the people who are interested in her life and writing are probably the people who are reading her book in this case, but sometimes during a speech, you might have a particular audience like the American people, or American Republicans, or baseball fans. You'll find out later, another speech we'll look at, right? And then perhaps people who are well educated and look down on those who do not have a formal education. She seems to like identify with her audience when she talks about how she's embarrassed of her mother's like grammatical mistakes. Okay, and then finally, context. This is the historical or cultural issues going on at the time. Angelou was writing in the late 1960s, which was after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and the civil rights movement was prominent in the 1960s. So Angelou would have experienced the discrimination that Black Americans faced in housing, education, employment, and more. So maybe she had seen some people being mistreated based on the fact that they weren't formally educated. And maybe she was moved by the injustice of like inequality in education when she wrote this piece. So her writing about formal education could be a response to discrimination that Black Americans faced during this time. Okay, so you are going to take a speech from here, and you're going to do the same thing in this column right here. If you're taking your notes by hand, you can just do like bullet points. I would like you to write some of this down just briefly so that you have another example in your notes. Okay, once you're done with that section, we're moving on to part 3. These 5 tools that are linked here are all tools that we're going to be using throughout the year, and it's kind of up to you to pick the one that you think is going to be best for you. I might, depending on a text, choose one that I think will work well for that text. but it's also based on what's going to work well for you. So you are going to open up each of these tools and spend 2 or 3 minutes looking at each one. It's okay if you look at it, you're like, I don't know all these words, or like, I'm not sure exactly what this means. That's okay. We're going to be looking at these resources over and over again. So this is just kind of like a check it out, look at it for the first time, right? And then after you've looked at all the links, you're going to choose 2 tools that you think would be most helpful in the future when you're analyzing the rhetorical situation of speeches or essays. And then you're just going to write 2 to 3 bullet points in your notes about each of the 2 sources, about why you think they're helpful, and then save the tool somewhere for future use. So you can like either save this whole document somewhere, or you can bookmark the notes that you're taking, or bookmark these individual documents, or you might make a copy of them for your own Google Drive. So we are going to return to some of these later, but I want you to kind of briefly look at them. Okay, and those are the notes. We will have a quiz to go with the notes later, and it'll be open note. Okay, thanks for watching.